Look at the battery percentage on your phone right now. Or, I mean, just the time on your screen.
Right, it's right there.
Yeah, you look at a symbol like 82% or, 4.15, and you instantly, effortlessly know what it means. Your brain just translates those little pixels into a concrete understanding of time or power.
It's completely automatic for us.
Exactly. But I want you to imagine a world where the abstraction of 82 simply doesn't exist. Like, imagine a reality where you can only understand a quantity by physically holding 82 objects in your hands.
Or looking at a massive pile of 82 stones.
Right, we treat numbers like gravity or oxygen,
Yeah.
just these fundamental laws of the universe that have always been there. But today, we are looking at how humanity actually had to invent them.
Which is such a wild concept to wrap your head around.
It really is. So we are taking a deep dive into how our ancestors made the greatest cognitive leap in human history, which is the abstraction of quantity.
And it is arguably the most important invisible architecture of modern human life. We are using Olga Forin's book, When the World Learned to Count, as our framework today.
A phenomenal source.
Truly. And what is brilliant about her approach is that she doesn't treat math as this sterile, objective timeline of discoveries.
Yeah, no dry textbook stuff here.
Exactly. She frames it as a deeply human, deeply cultural act of survival and cognition. We aren't just looking at, when someone figured out what 2 plus 2 is.
Right.
We are looking at how different civilizations pulled their mathematical systems directly from the mud of their riverbanks, the cycles of their stars, and the structures of their governments.
Which is just so cool. And the book uses this really fascinating allegorical device to guide us through all of this. We follow a young girl named Omi.
Yes, Omi.
And she is guided by a golden firefly. Now, I know what you might be thinking listening to this. That sounds like a children's fable.
It does sound like a bedtime story at first glance.
It really does.
Yeah.
But we need to view Omi not just as a character, but as an anthropological lens. She is sort of a stand-in for early human consciousness, right? Waking up and looking at the world, asking, who taught us to count?
And the author lays down a really core philosophy right in the opening notes of the book. Learning to count wasn't just about utility. She says it required curiosity, courage, and care.
I love that phrasing.
It's so poignant. That specific phrasing, curiosity, courage, and care, it really recalibrates how we need to approach this entire discussion.
Because usually mathematics is just handed to us as a finished, polished product.
Right, it's a rigid right or wrong discipline.
Right.
But when early humans were trying to categorize the chaos of the world, the seasons, the herds, the predators.
The star.
Exactly, the stars. It required immense courage to try and impose order on something so terrifyingly vast. To look at the infinite night sky and try to break it down into manageable, understandable pieces, that is an act of defiance against the unknown.
Which brings us to the very first step in this cognitive evolution. The premise of the book's opening is that before there were symbols on a page, people were already counting.
They were counting the physical phenomena around them.
Yeah, the text uses these great sensory markers. It says, leaves whispering 1, raindrops answering 2.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Right. It implies that the capacity to categorize is innate, but the expression of it is completely tied to the environment.
And the environment dictated the method. Think about it. If you strip away paper, stone tablets, clay, if you go back to the absolute earliest iterations of human communal living, how do you record data?
You don't have a hard drive.
You don't even have a notebook. The answer, which we see as Omi travels to an early African tribal setting, is the human body and the air itself.
This part blew my mind. So Omi sits around a fire with drummers and a griot.
A traditional storyteller.
Right. And the firefly points out that before symbols, there were songs. The very first spreadsheet wasn't visual.
No, it was auditory.
It was auditory. The drummers play specific beats, and those beats are the numbers. So 1 beat for the first light, 2 for the pair that made the world.
And 3 for the harmony of all things.
Let's unpack the mechanics of that, because it's doing like 2 massive cognitive tasks at once.
It really is. First off, it is an oral ledger. When the griot taps his chest and says, here is where we kept them safe, he is talking about biological data storage.
Keeping the numbers safe inside the body.
Precisely. Our brains are uniquely wired to retain information when it is embedded in rhythm and rhyme. Think about the epic poems of Homer.
Oh, yeah. The Iliad and the Odyssey.
Right. Those were memorized and recited entirely out loud long before anyone wrote them down. The rhythm acts as an error-correcting code.
Wait, an error-correcting code? How so?
Well, if you miss a beat or skip a syllable, the song breaks. The rhythm stumbles, and you instantly know the data is corrupt.
Oh, wow. That makes total sense. If I try to memorize a string of 10 random numbers, I'll forget it in 5 minutes.
Most people would.
But if you put those 10 numbers to a melody, like a catchy jingle, I will remember it for the rest of my life.
Exactly. So they were essentially using musical time signatures to build an indestructible shared memory bank.
That is just brilliant.
But notice the second thing they are doing. They aren't just reciting empty placeholders like 1, 2, 3. They are mapping numbers to foundational cosmology.
Right. Tying it to meaning.
Yes. 1 is creation. 2 is duality, male and female, day and night. 3 is the harmony that comes from that duality. The number itself has a psychological weight. It isn't divorced from meaning.
It's full-body mathematics. The text describes Omi clapping her hands, feeling the numbers in her bones. The drummers go boom for 1, boom, boom for 2. It's like how we naturally tap our feet to a beat before we know anything about, formal musical time signatures.
We feel the count before we intellectualize it.
Exactly. You feel it. But obviously, you can't drum a song forever. Eventually, the music stops, and you need to leave some kind of record.
And the book shows this transition happening right next to that very fire. There's a grandmother taking that rhythmic count and turning it into something tangible.
Right. She's tying knots in a rope. And a few feet away, Omi is stringing colorful beads.
Colored for the sunrise in red, the river in blue, and the harvest in green.
This is the crucial bridge from the ephemeral-like sound to the physical object. But I am stuck on the idea of tying a knot to represent something.
Why is that?
Because the grandmother is tying knots for her cows and her baskets, but the text says she's also tying knots for her 3 brave sons.
Yes, she is.
She is using the exact same physical mechanism to represent a piece of property as she is represent a human being she loves. Isn't that just a basic tally system, though, like scratching marks on a prison wall?
It is a tally, but do not underestimate the massive cognitive leap a tally requires. It is the absolute beginning of one-to-one correspondence.
Okay, unpack that term, one-to-one correspondence.
To realize that a knot in a piece of fiber can legally and conceptually substitute for a massive breathing cow or a human being requires an incredible level of abstract thinking.
Because the knot doesn't look like a cow.
Exactly. You are stripping away the fur, the weight, the personality of the cow, and reducing its entire existence to a single data point on a string.
Wow.
And doing this allows you to manipulate the world in your hands. You can literally hold your entire herd in your palm.
That is wild to think about.
It's powerful.
And the Griot says, we count what we love.
Which is such a beautiful thematic takeaway. Math began as an intimate, communal, and sensory experience.
It did. But here's the thing. A knot on a rope only works when you are managing a small ecosystem. It works when you know exactly which knot means the cow and which knot means the sun.
Right.
What happens when your village turns into a city of 100,000 people? You can't just have a giant warehouse full of millions of unmarked ropes.
You definitely can't. The tribal rhythmic methods hit a scalability wall.
A hard wall.
When you transition from a small nomadic or semi-nomadic tribe to a massive sedentary agricultural civilization, the forces you are dealing with change completely.
You aren't just dealing with your immediate neighbors anymore.
Exactly. You are dealing with macro environmental patterns. You are dealing with raw, unpredictable forces of nature. You need a permanent, scalable record.
Which moves us out of the village and brings Omi to the banks of the River Nile. The environment completely changes, and so does the motivation for math.
Egypt.
Yeah. She meets a young boy who explains that their entire civilization is basically held hostage by the moods of the river. Sometimes it's calm, sometimes it rises like a shining blanket.
They're tracking the Nile's inundation cycle. The river would predictably flood its banks, depositing nutrient-rich silt and then recede, which allowed for planting seeds.
Without that flood, there is famine. Pure and simple.
And the boy tells Omi, we count the river because the river counts us.
I want to push back on that romantic phrasing just a bit.
Huh.
Well, we count the river because the river counts us. It paints this picture of ancient Egyptians just sitting on the banks, gazing thoughtfully at the water to harmonize with nature.
Sure, it sounds very peaceful.
Right. But isn't the reality a lot more bureaucratic? Once you invent a system to track the flooding so you can grow mass quantities of grain, you are also inventing a system to tax that grain. Math wasn't just born out of survival, it was born out of state control, wasn't it?
That is an incredibly important distinction, and you are absolutely right. The shift to written mathematics in Egypt is deeply tied to the rise of centralized power.
Taxes. It always comes down to taxes.
It really does. The pharaoh's administration needed to know exactly how much land was available after the flood so they could calculate the expected yield.
And subsequently, how much they could extract.
Exactly. To fund the state, the military, and of course the monumental architecture. You cannot build the pyramids on a barter system of knots and beads.
No, you'd need millions of knots.
You need a rigorous, standardized, bureaucratic language.
So how do they actually do the math? The source breaks down the specific hieroglyphic symbols Omi learns, and they are visually so cool.
Let's walk through them.
Okay, so 1 is a simple vertical stroke, very intuitive. 10 is a heel bone. 100 is a coil of rope. And 1,000 is a lotus flower.
The symbols get more complex as the civilization scales.
They do. But my question is, how does an Egyptian scribe actually calculate with a lotus flower and a heel bone? It seems so clunky.
This is where we have to look at the mechanism of an additive base 10 system. They recognize bundles of 10, which is why they have specific symbols for 10, 100, 1,000, but it was purely additive. They didn't have place value like we do.
Let's explain that difference for a second. What does it actually mean that they didn't have place value?
Well, in our modern system today, the number 9 means 9 ones.
Right.
If I move that exact same symbol one spot to the left and right 90, the shape hasn't changed. It's still a 9, but its value is suddenly 90 because of its position.
The position gives it power.
Exactly. The Egyptians did not have that concept. To write the number 90, they couldn't just write a 9 and a 0. They had to draw the symbol for 10, the heel bone 9, separate times.
Oh, wow. So if I wanted to write down, say, 999 bushels of wheat for the tax collector.
Get ready to draw. You would have to draw 9 coils of rope, 9 heel bones, and 9 strokes.
That is 27 separate symbols just to represent 999.
It is highly intuitive to read because you literally just count up all the pictures you see, but it is intensely labor-intensive to write.
I can imagine.
And incredibly cumbersome if you want to perform complex multiplication or division. The cognitive load on the scribe was immense.
That makes the final symbol Omi sees so much more profound then. Because for 1 million, the Egyptians didn't just string together 1,000 lotus flowers.
No, they do.
They invented a totally new symbol, a god with open arms. When I read that, it really struck me how sterilized our modern math is.
How do you mean?
Well, today, 1 million is just a 1 with 6 zeros. We type it in a fraction of a second. We deal in billions and trillions on spreadsheets without even blinking.
It's just routine data.
Yeah, but for the Egyptians, to write down 1 million required drawing a deity overwhelmed by vastness. Isn't it fascinating that their concept of 1 million is literally a god throwing their arms wide?
It perfectly captures the psychological ceiling of their world. Does our modern version strip away the awe? I think it does. 1 million wasn't an everyday accounting figure for them. It was the realm of the infinite, the stars, the divine. To express it, you literally had to invoke the gods.
That is beautiful.
Yeah.
But hidden within this heavy, symbol-laden system, the source highlights a quiet moment where the foundation of modern math is actually foreshadowed.
Yes, the concept of space.
Right. Before leaving Egypt, Omi watches a priest pressing marks into clay. And she notices something odd. Some marks are grouped tightly together, and others have a deliberate gap between them.
She asks him how he knows what the marks mean since they all look the same.
And the firefly tells her, because of the space.
The priest confirms it. He says that if the marks stand together, they tell one story. If they stand apart, they tell another.
Which is just incredible.
Without that space, he says, everything would become one long, unintelligible sound. It is the earliest whisper of zero.
The early zero.
Yes. They didn't have a number for nothing, but they understood that empty space had structural value. It organized the chaos.
But if Egypt used numbers to tame the chaos of the river and build a massive state bureaucracy, the source takes us to other civilizations that use numbers for something entirely different, maintaining philosophical and structural order.
Which brings Omi to the east and the west.
Let's go to the east first. The firefly takes Omi to a quiet bamboo garden in China. And the contrast from Egypt is immediate.
It's a totally different vibe.
We leave the heavy clay and stone of the Mediterranean and enter a world of fluid ink and philosophy. Omi meets an old scholar who's painting the Chinese numerals.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Right, but his instruction to her isn't about agriculture or taxes. He tells her that numbers are not just for counting, they're for keeping balance.
He says, each stroke must balance heaven and earth. Two in each strokes, and you lose the wind.
I have to admit, when I read this part, I was deeply skeptical.
Really? Why?
Well, it sounds like beautiful poetry, but it doesn't sound like math. Like balancing heaven and earth with a brushstroke. How does writing the symbol for 6 actually balance anything in a practical physical calculation?
Your skepticism is completely warranted if we only look at the ink on the page.
Right.
The written characters in China were deeply tied to Taoist cosmology. The symbol for 4 represents the 4 corners. 5 represents the 5 elements: wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. 6 is the 6 directions.
So it is philosophical.
It is, but here's the key. The actual calculation wasn't done on paper. The written symbols were just the final record. The actual math was done using counting rods.
Okay, what are counting rods? How do they work?
Imagine a grid placed on a table. The ancient Chinese used small, physical bamboo rods placed within the squares of this grid to represent numbers. And here is where the balancing becomes literal, not just poetic.
I'm listening.
They used red rods to represent positive numbers and black rods to represent negative numbers.
Wait, hold on. They had negative numbers. The Egyptians didn't have that.
Exactly. This is centuries before negative numbers were accepted or even understood in Europe. By physically moving these rods around the grid, adding a black rod here to cancel out a red rod there, they were literally balancing the equation on the table.
That is amazing.
The math was an active physical manipulation of opposing forces. It perfectly mirrored their philosophy of yin and yang. So when the scholar talks about losing the wind or finding balance, he's talking about the physical reality of resolving a complex algebraic matrix using these rods.
Oh, that completely changes the context for me. The philosophy wasn't just decorative.
No, not at all.
It was the operating system for their mathematics. The text says, the scholar tells Omi, in every line, the world breathes once. It is a living, breathing system of equilibrium.
It is.
But just as I'm wrapping my head around this delicate balancing act, the book rips us away and drops us into the most aggressively practical environment imaginable.
Rome.
Rome. The juxtaposition is just brilliant. You go from the quiet bamboo garden to the loud, dusty, blindingly white marble of Rome, a world of chisels and empire.
Omi meets a builder shaping stone. No philosophy, no breathing wind, no elements, just sheer brute utility. He shows her how they count with what they physically carry, their hands.
It is so brutally simple. 1 finger's I, 2 fingers is 2, 3 is 3, 4 is 4. And for 5, V, he just spreads his hand wide.
The V shape between the thumb and fingers.
It is literally a picture of a hand. And for 10, X, he crosses his 2 wrists together. 2 hands.
The builder tells Omi their numbers are honest as stone and stand straight as pillars, like soldiers who never forget their place.
Which is very on brand for Rome.
Very. And they were incredibly effective for what Rome needed to do, which was build infrastructure and conquer territory.
Okay, I have an analogy for this.
Right.
Because Roman numerals always confuse me when I try to do anything beyond basic addition.
Let's hear it.
It feels like Roman numerals aren't actually a system for calculating. They are a system for recording.
Okay.
If Chinese math is like painting a delicate mobile where every piece must perfectly counterbalance the others, Roman math is like stacking heavy stone blocks. Highly effective for building an empire, but rigid. It's like trying to do algebra using a Polaroid camera.
A Polaroid camera. Expand on that.
Well, if you have a Polaroid camera, you can take a perfect, durable picture of exactly how many sheep you have right now.
Right.
8 sheep. Snap the photo. There it is. It is great for taking inventory. But you can't use that Polaroid picture to easily predict how many sheep you will have in 3 generations if they breed at a certain rate.
No, you can't.
The Roman system is a fantastic snapshot, but it is terrible for dynamic processing.
That is an excellent analogy. Roman math is fundamentally static. It is a sophisticated tally system. If you want to add 12 and 7, you literally just shove the letters together and simplify.
Right. 12 plus 7 becomes 8, which simplifies to 19.
But try doing long division.
Oh, nightmare.
Try dividing MDCL x6 by 14. It is a computational nightmare because it lacks positional mechanics.
And the source material explicitly calls out a crucial flaw in the final chapter.
Yes, it does.
It notes that Roman math stopped short because it lacked a vital concept. They didn't use 0.
They lacked the very concept that the Egyptian clay priest hinted at. They had no empty space. They had no silence.
They could build aqueducts, they could build the Colosseum, but their mathematics hit a dead end because you cannot explore advanced algebra, calculus, or physics using a system made of solid stone blocks.
You need a void. And to find the culture that finally conquered the concept of empty space, that gave the space a name and changed math forever, Omi has to cross the ocean.
She goes to the Americas.
Yes. She eventually ventures into a vibrant jungle, the Maya.
This is where the math gets genuinely mind-bending for me. Yeah. The environment is entirely different.
Parrots, drums, smooth stone carvings.
Right. Omi meets women carving symbols into the stone.
Yeah.
And it looks simple at first. A single dot is 1. A bold horizontal bar is 5.
So a bar with 2 dots on top is 7. Visually, it is very clean.
But the underlying engine of this math is totally alien to how we think today, because the Maya did not use a base 10 system like we do.
No, they used a base 20 system.
Right.
A vigesimal system, yes. Base 10, our decimal system, likely evolved because we look at our 2 hands and see 10 fingers. The Maya looked at their hands and their feet, 20 digits.
And while that might sound like just a minor cultural quirk, mechanically, it completely changes how numbers scale.
It absolutely does.
I genuinely struggled to conceptualize this when reading the source. Like, walk me through exactly how a positional base 20 system works compared to our base 10.
Sure. Let's look at place value. In our base 10 system, you have columns. The column on the far right is the ones. Move 1 spot left, it's the tens. Move 1 spot left again, it's the hundreds.
Right. Very straightforward. Every time you move a column left, you multiply the value by 10.
Exactly. So the number 2 of 5 means 2 hundreds, 0 tens, and 5 ones.
Got it.
Now, switch to Mayan base 20. They wrote their numbers vertically from bottom to top, but the principle is the same. The first slot at the bottom is still the ones.
Okay.
But the second slot isn't multiplied by 10, it is multiplied by 20. And the third slot isn't multiplied by 100, it is multiplied by 20 times 20.
Which is 400.
Right.
Okay, wait. So if I have a number in the second slot, say I put a 2 in the second slot. In our system, that's 20. But in the Mayan system, a 2 in the second slot means 220, so it's 40.
Exactly. And if you put a 2 in the third slot, it means 2 400s. So just the symbol for 2 in the third slot represents 800.
That scales incredibly fast.
It does.
Yeah.
This allowed the Maya to record massive astronomical figures using very few symbols. They were obsessed with deep time.
Tracking the stars.
Tracking the moons, the seasons, the cycles of Venus, solar eclipses. They built massive calendars stretching over thousands of years. Base 20 was a high-performance engine for calculating infinity.
But to make that engine run, they needed a crucial piece of technology. And this is where the 0 finally shows up as a concrete symbol.
Yes.
Omi watches the carver point to a specific symbol in the stone. It's a carved shell. And the woman whispers to her, "That is 0, our breath and seed of time."
Think about the shape of a shell, specifically a conch shell. It is a spiral.
Omi touches it and describes it as empty but endless. I was fascinated by that visual.
It holds a ton of philosophical weight. A spiral circles a void, returning to the same position but further along the axis. The Mayan calendar was built on interlocking cycles. When a cycle ended, it didn't just stop like a Roman tally.
He couldn't.
No, it had to reset to 0 to begin again. The woman says 0 allows time to begin again, like the moon after darkness.
It's the mechanism of rebirth. And mathematically, if you don't have a symbol for 0, you can't tell the difference between certain numbers in a positional system.
Precisely. You wouldn't be able to tell the difference between the number 41, which would be 2 dots in the 20 slot, and 1 dot in the 1 slot, and the number 401.
Which would be 1 dot in the 400 slot, nothing in the 20 slot, and 1 dot in the 1 slot.
Exactly. Without the shell to hold that empty middle slot open, the entire calendar collapses into gibberish.
By giving the void a name and a physical symbol, the Maya tamed it. They made nothing perform a structural job.
But as advanced as the Maya were, their system stayed isolated in the Americas. To find the culture that gave this space a name and changed math forever on a global scale, Omi has one final flight.
Over the ocean, to the desert, the Arabic world.
The imagery here is stark and beautiful. It is nighttime, the dunes of gold and wind. The stars are like lanterns on paper.
Omi meets a scholar drawing in the sand by starlight. And this is where we finally see the geometric Arabic numbers, the digits that rule our lives today.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Right. But the scholar explains their origin using geometry, not tally marks. He says these shapes were born from angles.
It is a brilliant rationalization of shape and value. The scholar tells her that the number 1 has one sharp angle.
Just a single point at the top.
Exactly. The number 2, written with its original jagged script, has 2 angles. 3 has 3 angles. He calls them sharp corners of reason.
Truth written small. I love that.
Oh,
It strips away the heavy cosmology of the Chinese elements, and it strips away the physical bulk of the Roman stones.
it is pure abstract logic, made to be read by the eye and measured by the mind.
But then the scholar draws a circle in the sand, and Omi is completely confused,
She looks at it and says nothing. It looks like something.
which is such a brilliant point. She hits on the ultimate philosophical paradox of zero. How do you draw something to represent nothing?
The moment you draw a circle, you have created a shape. You have brought something into existence.
Right. If I hand you an empty box, the box is still a thing, even if the inside is empty. You're holding a box.
It's a container for nothing.
The scholar tells her that the circle is zero, and the source notes that this concept originated in ancient India.
Yes, and it's traveled through Arabic scholars and trade routes to the rest of the world.
The scholar calls it the gift of zero, the nothing that changed everything.
The transmission from India is a vital piece of the puzzle. Indian mathematicians were the first to formalize rules for computing with zero.
They didn't just use it as a placeholder, like the Maya or the Babylonians.
Right. They treated it as a true mathematical entity. You could add it, subtract it, multiply with it. When it was absorbed by the brilliant scholars of the Islamic Golden Age, it was fully integrated into the decimal positional system, creating the Hindu-Arabic numeral system we use today.
The scholar explains it to Omi so beautifully. He says, "Zero is the silence that makes music possible."
What a quote.
To understand how revolutionary this is, think about language. If you open a book, you see letters forming words.
Mhm.
But if there were absolutely no blank spaces between those words, the text would be one massive, unbroken block of letters.
You wouldn't be able to read it.
Exactly. It would just be continuous, incomprehensible visual noise. The blank spaces are what define the boundaries of the words.
They give the letters meaning by separating them.
Right, wait, I shouldn't just say right, because there's a computational layer here too, isn't there? It isn't just about making it readable. The space actively changes the value of the numbers around it.
Yes, because it unleashes the full power of positional notation. With just 10 symbols, 0 through 9, you can represent literally any quantity in the universe.
From the microscopic scale of an atom to the vastness of a galaxy.
Exactly. A 1 by itself is just 1. But put a 0 behind it, and that 1 is violently shifted to the left, becoming 10. Put 9 zeros behind it, and that same simple, tiny stroke of ink is suddenly a billion.
The zero acts as a lever, infinitely multiplying the power of the other digits.
It does. The Roman builder could only count what he could carry in his hands. But this circle in the sand gave humanity the tool to count what we cannot hold.
The text reminds us of the modern implications in Chapter 9. It says, without zero, there are no computers.
No place values, no concept of infinity.
A microchip operates entirely on binary code. Ones and zeros. Something and nothing. On and off. The entire modern digital age is built inside that tiny circle drawn in the sand.
That nothing became everything. As the firefly flies in circles, tracing endless zeros in the night air, it tells Omi that all counting begins with nothing. That empty space, that pause, that structural void became the engine for all modern human advancement.
Which brings Omi's journey to a close. She has gathered the rhythms of Africa,
The river signs of Egypt,
the balance of China,
the pillars of Rome,
the astronomical cycles of the Maya.
and the sharp angles and profound void of the Arabic world.
And as the deep dive synthesizes all of this, the firefly leaves her and us with the central thesis of Olga Forn's entire book.
A firefly tells Omi, say it once, now say it true. The world learned to count. Through you.
Through you. It completely shatters the illusion that math is just this cold, objective reality sitting out in the universe waiting to be discovered.
Counting is a deeply human act.
It is intimately human. The universe doesn't count. The universe just exists. A star doesn't know it's one of a billion. A river doesn't know it rises exactly 120 days a year. We do.
We impose the numbers on the world to make sense of it. The numbers are artifacts of human attention.
They're the footprints of our consciousness trying to find balance in the chaos. Whether it was a grandmother tying a knot to remember her son, or an Egyptian scribe desperately trying to predict a flood to save a city.
Counting was always about observing what matters. Heartbeats, stars, rivers, and leaving space for the unknown.
So as we bring this deep dive to an end, I want to connect this back to you, the listener.
It's important to reflect on this.
Tomorrow, when you look at a spreadsheet, or punch a PIN code into a keypad, or just check your bank app, pause for a second.
Look past the glowing screen.
Yeah. Try to see the invisible histories hiding in those digits you type every single day. When you type a 1, you are striking the angular geometry of a desert scholar.
When you look at an old clock face with Roman numerals, you are seeing the heavy stone pillars of an ancient empire.
When you do basic algebra, you are engaging in a philosophical balancing act honed in bamboo gardens thousands of years ago. You are participating in an unbroken ancient conversation.
It is a stunning legacy to realize that every digit is a monument to human survival. But beyond the history, there is a profound psychological takeaway here, specifically tied to the discovery of zero.
Let's hear it.
The book frames zero as the silence that makes music possible. It is the intentional empty space that allows for infinite growth, structure, and understanding.
The pause that gives meaning to the sound.
Precisely. We live in a society that operates like an endless tally system.
Oh, absolutely.
We're constantly counting emails, counting followers, counting minutes, stacking tasks like Roman bricks with no end in sight.
We abhor the empty space.
We fill every second with noise. So my final thought for you to explore on your own is this. If the greatest mathematical revolution in human history was simply learning to leave an empty space and call it zero, because it's the silence that makes the music possible, what are the deliberate zeros, the intentional empty spaces and pauses that you are leaving in your own life to give meaning to everything else you do?
Wow. That is something to sit with.
It really is.
In a world drowning in numbers, perhaps the most important thing we can do is protect the spaces between them. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you look at the world and the numbers that define it just a little bit differently today.
Keep leaving space.
And remember, before numbers ever had names, the leaves still whispered 1, the raindrops answered 2, and the stars blinked 3. Keep counting what matters.